So this is very exciting. I'm so happy that this podcast has finally come. I've been wanting to interview you ever since I started my podcast. I first heard you speaking at Juilliard.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was the very first time I heard about the O-1 visa, and I was thinking about life beyond Juilliard. And I didn't know what to expect. In Mexico, we are very afraid of lawyers and the law.
So are we. I hate lawyers. I absolutely hate them.
We're just all terrified about that, but you made it so accessible. And I think every single time anyone hears you speak about the process, I think people feel very reassured. So I really want to talk to you because of that, and because I think that your delivery is really, it really sticks with you. It's really funny.
Thank you.
I really hope that my audience is going to enjoy.
Well, I usually
your
have
presence.
I always say my goal is to educate and or entertain. If I can do both, that's fine.
Hey, that's good.
And if I can do one or the other, I'm happy with that too.
Well, today we have Brian Goldstein. He is my immigration attorney, and I actually just got approved for my O-1 visa, and my wife got the O-3.
Which is great.
Right. And we were approved, and my process with you was really wonderful.
I mean, I will say,
yes.
Just the one to be technically correct. I'm a performing arts attorney because we only work with, to the extent we do our immigration work, it's only with artists. So we don't handle normal people, as my mother would say. So if somebody comes and they don't tap dance, paint, or sing, I have no clue what to do. We refer all that stuff to other full-time. I mean, we do our immigration work, but we're also working on commissions and licensing and other projects.
Yeah.
It just ties in nicely with that. But if somebody came in and they needed immigration help with a scientist, clueless.
No.
Sports, I don't know. I don't have a clue.
Interesting.
So we don't do any of that stuff or anything if someone, God forbid, has been deported or I can't help.
That's something else.
Totally cannot deal with that.
And that's the thing with immigration. There's just so many levels to it. I love to discuss it, and we'll talk about that.
Sure.
But I'll just read your bio I have on hand. Recognized in the New York Times as a super lawyer in the fields of entertainment, intellectual property, and artist immigration, and named one of 2020's top art professionals of the year by Musical American magazine, Brian is a partner in the performing arts and entertainment firm of Goldstein Williams PLLC, as well as managing director of the arts management firm of Goldstein Williams International LLC. All right, so there's two things there. Mm-hmm. Would you be able to explain to us, first of all, what is Goldstein and Williams PLLC? What is PLLC?
It's a dumb lawyer thing. So when you're a corporation, you can become a C Corp, which means you've got shareholders and that kind of stuff. Or you can form what's called a limited liability company, which is I usually recommend for artists and things.
Absolutely.
Which is called an LLC. Mm-hmm. If you are somebody who has a license, like a doctor or a lawyer or something, you have to be a professional LLC.
Oh,
and it doesn't mean a thing other than you put that P in front of it because at some point it made some lawyer happy who created the rules. So it's just LLC, professional LLC, and I think my suspicion is it was created because lawyers and doctors wanted to sound superior, so they wanted to have a little P. That's all that means.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, and then managing director of the arts management firm Goldstein Williams International LLC, and that comes in very handy because when I did my paperwork with you, I heard from some other colleagues that usually they get their immigration attorney and then they have to find someone to sponsor them or to ask for the visa for them.
Right.
You can correct me, of course, on the language.
No, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's one way to do it. It sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. There's pros and cons for doing it that way.
Yeah, but exactly. But you are able to provide both.
Sure. Yes.
Which is, I think, I didn't really research further from you, but beyond the work that we did. Yep. But I think that not all lawyers offer that. So
that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's something that was really helpful.
Correct.
Like I didn't have to go to anyone else to get like the sponsorship or
Yeah. I mean, it also is. It's if a major artist, or let's say major artist, sometimes their manager will be it, but a lot of younger artists don't have managers. So it's like, what do they do? And it's like, oh well, rather than go around and try to beg and borrow. We can just do that. We don't charge extra for it. It's actually easier for us to do it that way. So that's it literally is just extra names on a paper.
Yeah, so that's definitely something, a really good selling point for you, that if someone is figuring out which attorney to go to, if you say you can offer that, that's a little less hassle for us, right?
I would hope we have better selling points than me being able to put my name on a piece of paper.
Okay.
Yes, I can list my name in 2 places.
Your firm's name is on my visa.
That is correct. Yeah.
That is really helpful that we didn't have to think about it. And,
correct, Traditionally in the past, 20 years ago, because I'm old, the venues and things, orchestras would sort of hire somebody or engage someone, and then they would do the petitions. Nowadays, it's a lot more common for someone to say, look, we're going to, the San Francisco Symphony is going to engage you, but they're not going to get involved in your visa.
Oh,
so that's a new thing because it's gotten so complicated and they don't have the staff. So a lot of times some artists are big enough that they'll do it in-house. Others, they'll say, look, we're going to hire you. You figure it out.
You figure out, like
the artist.
You pay everything.
Or the artist agent or manager or the artist themselves, but we're not going to be your petitioner. We're not going to get involved in the process. That's becoming more and more common just because the process is so stupid.
Yeah, it is. Before we get into all the lawyer thing, I would love to get to talk a little bit about where you come from, what your background is. I was reading that you actually did theater. You still do theater. You write. You studied medieval history in Oxford.
That's right.
That's all amazing.
That's
and
right.
I asked this because I know that some of my artist friends are at a point in their lives around their late 20s where they actually maybe considering going to law school as well. And what I really like about you is that you're an artist and you are like writing, you're doing artistic stuff, but you're also an attorney. So can I ask you where that come from? You studied theater first. You're an actor first.
I mean, it's like everything in life. You figure it out because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it's not. I'd love to say, there was a plan. No plan. I was double major in theater and English. I was a theater kid from as far back as I could possibly remember.
Wow.
And plus I also liked history. And when I got to college, I kind of wound up being focusing on period comedy of all sorts of very sort of tied in performing and history and stuff like that.
Is that kind of similar to period instruments?
Yeah, very much. It's the same thing. Yeah, you're doing theater from the 18th century or...
In the way they did it back then?
Yeah, or I eventually formed a comedy troupe that we would write new material in the style of old stuff. So we would kind of combine the two. Yeah, we were not historically accurate in any way. But we would just say, okay, let's pretend we're in the 18th century and we'll mix it in with a lot of bad jokes from the Catskills and things like that. But it was basically, it was a fun way to play with the past.
So that was
cool. Fun. And then why did I go to law school? Because what else do you do? I figured, I was good in theater and I was really good in front of an audience. So I thought, maybe I'll do trial work, not realizing how non-theatrical it was. Because, I figured there'd be surprise witnesses and that was really horrible. But I did go into what I call normal law. And
normal law?
Yeah, litigating. You basically take anybody who comes along, pays you, and you find reasons to sue them. And it's horrible. I thought going to, and you talk about friends because a lot of students and young people come to me about going to law school.
Yeah.
I thought law school was great. Law school is a great skill set. It's really sort of somebody once described it as the sort of the queen of the liberal arts because you're bringing philosophy and literature and thinking and writing all into one place. So I think that was great.
I've never thought about that. Yeah.
Would I ever recommend anyone becoming an attorney? No, absolutely not.
How come?
If you do, let me explain it this way. If you're going to help people, that's great. If you're going to do like environmental law or you're going to do civil rights law or you're going to do domestic violence or things like that. Yeah. The problem is, or performing arts law. The problem is none of that makes any money.
That's
if you're going to there's a difference between performing arts law and entertainment law. Entertainment law is dealing with reality TV and movies, and they make tons of money. If you're doing things that help people, civil rights, environment, things like that,
money goes out. It doesn't cap it.
Yeah, your clients are all dolphins. Your clients are all yes, we are fortunate to have large clients and theater and that kind of stuff, but it's theater, it's classical music. They're never going to make what Taylor Swift makes.
Absolutely,
Real lawyers. If you get into, the things you see on billboards, the things you see, that's like selling your soul to Satan. Yeah. They will sue anybody for any reason. The justice system and the law system in the U.S. is insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
world famous.
Horribly world famous for abuse.
Absolutely.
If someone came to me and they said, Horatio offended me, and I would like to sue him, and I'm like, I can find you a reason to sue him. Give me $10,000.
Wow.
And I will sue you, and then it could be the world's dumbest lawsuit, but you're going to have to hire a lawyer to go in and have my suit kicked out, and you won't be able to afford it. Yeah. So I will say, okay, give me X amount of money, and you'll save, so let's say you'd have to get $10,000 to get your own lawyer. We'll pay my guy $5,000 and you'll get out free. But I've gotten you into the system.
It's like an intimidation lawsuit, right?
Oh, God, yeah. Now, if you have your own attorney, they're probably going to sue back with some counterclaim. Yeah. And now we're in the trenches, but the only people making the money are the lawyers. So Absolutely. I always say the funny part is if I let all of my clients do some of the stupid legal things that they want to do, I would make a fortune, but they'd all be out of work. So most of the time I'm going, no, you don't want, I know you're pissed. You don't want to sue them. Well, I'm like, don't do it.
So you have clients who are like, oh, I'm so angry.
Oh, God, all the time.
I want to sue the USCIS and stuff
Absolutely.
like that.
Well, or they don't like, I had someone the other day who wanted to get out of his agent contract. And he never read it to begin with. He just signed it. And now he wants to leave and realizes how horrible it was. So, what if we just, I'm like, that's not going to be your solution. It's just like anything we do, even with immigration. Any case we take, the old firm I used to work with back when I was working with Satan and his little demons, there's no case they would not take. It could be the worst, scummiest person. Pay him and it's a hired gun. I just turned someone down the other day where I said, this is how much this would cost to do what they wanted to do. And they said, well, let me think about it. And I said, well, okay, but I'm not going to do it even if you want to. Yeah. Well, you just told me how much. I said, that's how much I would charge, but that's not how much I'm going to accept because it's stupid for you to pay anything. Yeah, as you said, lawyers are the only ones who end up making money. Right. And I'm like, look, and I'm telling you, and this is kind of the role I have with a lot of the artists we work with, is if I'm walking away from money, then I'm telling you the truth. That's good. If I'm walking away from money, I'm telling you the truth. Right. Because think about that when you've got, let's say you've got a manager or an agent or any of the thousands of people that suck off an artist, they've got skin in the game. Yeah. I really don't think I'm not feeling well. I don't want to do this gig. Oh, you got to do the gig. Oh, you're going to piss off. Oh, relationships. Oh, bridges. Yeah, because it's also their commission. Absolutely. And you don't have anything you can win, of course, but. Well, we don't do lawsuits anymore. I used to do those. Oh, you did? Oh, yeah. No, I was in court all the time. Oh, really? And I did jury trials. And I was really good at it. As a litigator? You were? As a litigator. I went in, I've been in federal court. I've been in the Court of Appeals. I've done every kind from discrimination to fraud to real estate. Okay. And I regret every moment of it. So I thought you had specialized on immigration from the beginning. Oh, no. I was an idiot. I completely screwed that up. Okay, so how did it start? How did it start with performing arts? No. What was your first law gig? Your first interest, and how did you arrive at? I started out as an associate in a litigation firm, and when you're an associate, they just hand you cases and say, "Here, you're going to argue for this side," and it could be a traffic case. It could be, really? I remember different cases. We had some guy choked on a chicken bone at a fast food restaurant, and we were supposed to sue the restaurant for hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages he never really had, hoping to get some kind of settlement out of him.
So he choked, but he didn't die. He
didn't choke at all. He had he like coughed it up and it was done. But, oh my God, this is 1-800-SUE-ME, 1-800-I've-got pain. That's kind of what you do. You find out reasons to sue people. You've got somebody gets fired and they deserve to get fired, but they don't want to be fired. Mm-hmm. So you go to some lawyer and some lawyer says, well, give me $5,000 and I'll sue the employer and we'll get a settlement out of them. You're representing sometimes people you hate, but litigators will say, well, that's my job. My job is not to like my client. My job is to argue for them, even if the rest of society comes down around you. I think I finally had it. And my problem was I could always find reasons to settle cases. I was really good because in theater, I think, I always say the best training I ever had for life is theater. And I always tell anybody, take a theater class. I don't care what you're doing in life. If you're in college, take a theater class.
Because what part exactly?
Because, in fact, I have a lecture I do called Everything You Need to Know in Life You Learn in Theater. You learn how to listen. You learn how to, okay, I've got a character, but I can't really be in this play till I know what is motivating Horatio, what is motivating you. What are you look for not just words, but silent symbols, looks, eye. Okay, then there's that idea of being able to stand up and present yourself in front of people.
Absolutely.
Then there's that idea of like what we're all doing and what I wish, everybody in every field take you as a composer, for example, you're not just composing, you go to a reception and you're selling yourself. You're taking on a character. You may not want to be there. You might hate it, but you've got to act like you are. Absolutely. It's like every artist who is engaged and they're like, and you have to come to the fundraising event and you've got to go. And you're like, I don't want to go to the fundraising event. And then you have to put on your smiles. And you learn that through acting. You learn how what you wear will send messages to people. You learn all of the takes and the tells of just interacting with people, and people put on character.
Professional hypocrite.
Yeah. Well, interesting. The word thespian comes from the Greek
thespian.
Thespian.
Oh, thespian.
An actor. Thespian comes from the Greek word for liar. Because you were putting, not in a bad sense, but you were putting on a show. You were putting on something you weren't. That was lying.
Yeah.
So the whole idea of a hypocrite is the idea of saying one thing but meaning another. That's what you do as an actor.
Yeah.
That's what you do as a performer. But like Shakespeare said, we're all performing every single day.
Yeah.
In some capacity.
Oh, absolutely.
Even when someone says, how are you doing? And you lie and say, great.
But you're not great.
That's still acting. Yeah. So because of that, though, I could really see when two people were having a dispute, what was it really about? Hurt feelings? Was it about emotions? Was it about...
It's really human.
And so I could say, you know what? I think what you really want is this, and what they really want is that. And then they'll go, oh yeah, you're right. And then the case is over and the lawyers don't make any money, so that makes their head explode. So I was good at that.
At settling. At finding the peaceful way out.
Finding how to solve the problem. And an attorney will always make every problem worse. They will find a way to tell you what you could do as opposed to what you should do. And that's a very different thing, because people will come to me on all kinds, whether it's immigration or anything, and I'll say, look, here's what you could do. Yeah. Here's what your contract will allow you to do. Can I do this? Yes. Now, the other part of it is knowing that, should you? Could you sue them for this? Yes. Should you? No. Here's why. Okay. Could you win? Possibly, but you shouldn't, and here's why.
Yeah.
Could you apply for this certain kind of visa? Yes, but you shouldn't, and here's why.
Yeah, because
it's
actually,
two parts.
At one point I asked you, hey, do you think I should apply for my green card already? You said, no. Maybe because it's not the right moment.
And that's a great example, because I wind up dealing with a lot of young artists who've gone to, quote unquote, real immigration lawyers. And they'll say, I want to apply for a green card. Sure, give me $20,000. I'll apply for a green card. It's just, sure, why not?
They'll do it.
They'll do it.
I'm happy to take your money.
I'm happy to take your money. And oops, it didn't work. So there's that whole other analysis that goes with anything. What could I do? What should you do? And that's a two-part analysis, which is why I always say when people ask what I really do, I'll always say, yes, I have a law degree. My partner has a law degree. But it's really, in our day-to-day work, maybe 1% law and 99% therapy. That's really what we spend our days doing.
Yeah, just talking to the clients and
knowing knowing what the law is, any monkey can figure that out. Knowing what to do with that information and putting it in the context of theater and personalities and performance and the industry and how our little crazy world works is a whole different thing.
I see.
And that's what you need to kind of, yes, can you sue the Metropolitan Opera? Sure. Should you? Hell no. And here's why.
And why do you think you are that way? Do you think the majority of lawyers tend to the other direction?
Oh God, yeah. I hate lawyers. Like I said, I have like 5 of them that I'm close friends with that are sort of like me, and there's rest. I do enough. I take all my classes to keep my law degree, my law license valid.
Oh.
But do I go to bar me? Oh God, no. Do I hang out with them? No. Do I do anything involving other lawyers? Not if I can help it. I don't hang out with them. I don't talk with them. We have nothing in common. Except those of us, there's a small group that work in like theater and music and stuff. Very different. We're all dealing with, most of the work we're doing is making things happen, which is very different. That's somebody coming and saying, I'd like to license this. How do I get it? How do I make that? I have 5 people interested in commissioning this project, but it needs to involve these pictures from this museum and this lyric. That's much more interesting and much more fun. And it's much more, you're still dealing with, okay, I need to convince the nephew of the dead author to trust this person with that's where your theater and all your stuff comes in. That's a lot more fun. That's a lot more interesting. That's a lot, it's just like, again, going back to your immigration question.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of issue. On the one hand, I'm trying to convince an artist to give something, like a writer or a composer, for example. Someone may come to you and they want to record one of your performances, and you're like, no, I want to charge them, $1,000, and I've got to sort of say, well, look, here are the pros and cons. Here's the opportunity. Okay, I have to figure out how to address that problem.
All right.
That's not unlike figuring out how to convince a moron in the U.S. government what a conductor does. It's still a mind game. It's still trying to, in my world, it's still a creative theatrical endeavor.
Absolutely.
I got to figure out who my audience is. And
your audience is usually
sometimes it's idiots. A moron at USCIS.
Exactly.
Sometimes I remember one time I had a documentary filmmaker who needed to get the rights to this certain music of a deceased Broadway composer who was very famous, but his estate was controlled by his wife, and she said no to everything. And they had all these other people trying to get it, and I said, okay, here's the problem, because I know theater. She kind of gave up her career. She was an actress too for his, and she's still dealing with him. I said, so we're going to go to her, we're going to bring some flowers, and we're going to research the shows she did, and we're going to make her part of this documentary, and we're going to set aside and ask her questions about all the work she did.
Wow.
And boy, did her eyes just light up. Because it worked because I'm an actor too, and we're all performers at heart, whether you're a theater playing the viola da gamba, whatever. So a little ego stroking, a little understanding the backstory. She never got the career she wanted because her husband eclipsed her, although she was an actress and a singer, just never okay, well, let's pretend she was.
Yeah.
What was it? Let's talk about before you got married. We're not talking about Mr. Tony Award here. Let's talk about you. And didn't you do a show with this person? And how did you even know about that? Well, because I researched it. But okay, that's where you kind of think. That's where you learn to think cleverly. And I find that that's much more interesting than just making everyone's lives miserable.
So I really like how you are a lawyer who actually, it seems like you actually research the art that your clients do.
Well, it also helps that's the other thing, is being in that world. I already know it. So, if it's an artist I haven't worked with, I can look them on the internet. But, if someone gives me a list of awards and prizes, I can look right over and know, oh, yeah, I know that. Oh, yeah, that's the one in Italy. Oh, yeah, I know that award. Oh, yeah, I've worked with them. I can know right away. If someone says, well, my manager said, who's the manager? Oh, yeah, he's an idiot. Oh, no, I know them. They're good. When you work within one, it's kind of like when you go to a lawyer who will take any case.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about your industry.
Yeah.
If you go to a lawyer who only works in, this is a godforsaken industry, but let's say it's pharmaceuticals. Well, they're going to know everything about how to make and push pills. Well, you want that. Because it's kind of like going, if you're in aerospace, you want a lawyer who has a background in aerospace, so he knows how to help you. If you're going to work in live performing, you want someone who understands what backstage is like, understands what you need in the green room, understands, okay, if I'm working with a composer, what about the parts and scores? What about the charts? What about all the things they may not think to ask? Or a lot of times small regional companies, I've got, ironically, this happens with my wife is a classical music manager, and she deals with this all the time too, because you'll have a small orchestra that wants to, say, commission somebody, but they've never done it before. So they don't even know what questions to ask. So, you're kind of looking at it going, okay, I see what they want here, but they haven't really thought about this, or they haven't thought about that. So let's figure that out. Or a lot of times I'll have artists who come to me and they've, this is quite common. They've already collaborated, made a project, performed it. It's out the road. And now they want to negotiate the deal. And it's like, oh, Jesus Christ. But a lot of times you want somebody in that position to say, okay, you're going to need, you can't put, well, I'm only going to get 3 dressing rooms because we can have I had this happen one time with somebody who was self-producing an oratorio. She wanted to save money.
Self-producing an oratorio?
Yeah, she had more money than God. And she basically, it was one of these people that wrote her own stuff and hired an orchestra, then rented Avery Fisher Hall and put on her own show.
So much money, I can't... Man.
Oh my God! Oh my God! She had so much money and no idea what to do with it. And then she would produce. She was. I remember there was a friend of mine in the orchestra that she hired, and I hadn't even heard it yet. And I said, "What's it like?" He goes, "It sounds like it sounds like the kind of piece an overly rich 70-year-old person would write for themselves."
Makes
sense. I'm like, got it. He says, "But I'm being paid. I don't care."
I see.
But she basically had rented dressing rooms, figuring she could double and triple up the soloists. And I said, "Oh, they're not going to go for that. Oh, no. You're not going to take 2 sopranos and have them dressing in the same room."
No,
and you got to know that to kind of before there's a catastrophe on site. Absolutely. So it's things like that. I mean, I will research people and I will research, but I know how it works. You want someone who knows how it works.
Do you ever not take a case?
Oh God, yeah.
And what are the main reasons why you turn someone down?
I won't do anything if I think someone's being unfair. Okay. Like if like a lot of times managers will come and they'll say, "Brian, I want you to help me draft up my manager agreement." And I'm like, "Okay, let me know what are your terms?" And I'm like, "No, I really don't support," for example, some managers
fucking
will
over
say,
artists.
Yeah, to put it very bluntly. I mean, there are things that artists don't understand. There are things in the manager-artist relationship where artists also are completely clueless.
Yeah.
And sometimes I will call that out. But other times managers, a lot of them will say, "Well, if I ever book you at a venue, then, and you ever go back, I get a commission forever and ever and ever." I'm like, "I won't do it." Well, I just need to pay you. I said, "No, I think that's unethical." Now, on the other hand, the artist will say, "Well, I want to be able to leave at any time." And I'm like, "No, that's unfair too."
That's real unfair.
So I'm not doing that. If somebody comes in and says, "I want to sue someone just to intimidate," I won't do that. I don't do lawsuits anymore anyway. But, like I said, I won't take someone's money just because they want to try to get a green card or they want to try to get a visa. I won't do that. I won't take, if somebody's ripped off a copyright and they want me to help them obfuscate that. No, I'm not doing that. The industry's too small.
Yeah.
I don't want to get my name associated with doing something underhanded, or if I think someone is being an asshole, the one thing I will never do is represent an asshole.
That's good.
I will walk away from that, because my old firm, I learned the hard way, which is their client list is mostly assholes. I always find attorneys are like water.
Yeah.
Their clients will seek their own level. So you can tell a lot about attorneys as to who their clients are. Okay. Which is why most of them won't list that.
Absolutely. Have you ever heard the phrase, "You are the kind of lawyer that guilty people hire"? You don't want to be that type of person.
That's
type
correct.
Of lawyer.
That's correct. Yeah.
In terms of immigration, specifically people who want to get a green card or who want to get an O-1, are there any professions that you're like, oh, this is too difficult for me to find the reason why they should get approved? Do you ever turn down?
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to someone actually yesterday. Today's Wednesday, Monday, and this was a chamber festival, and they had engaged a young person to be their director of operations. She was a student, a graduate with a master's in business administration and a background in flute or something like that. So she was a performer, but her degrees were all in business administration. And she was working as the director of operations for this festival.
Yeah.
And she's been doing this as a student and then OPT, and now the issue is what happens next.
Yeah.
So I said, this is actually the one where I said, I'm not doing it. Because I said, here's the problem. I've taken artistic young students or whatever, or even I just did a visa for an artistic, for a general manager of an opera company.
Yeah.
It's easy enough to take somebody and get them an artist visa if they're doing something that you can draw a line to something artistic.
Yeah.
But if they're really not, like, for example, if I said, if you're willing to take the title director of operations and change it to director of special programming or director of, and then part of the job becomes taking her music background and curating special concerts. But that was totally not what her job was. Her job was literally running the office. And I said, that's going to be hard enough in a normal environment, let alone the screwed up one we're in now.
Yeah.
I said, you could try it, but would cost X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
And is this an employee you absolutely love? No. She was a good job, but I said, you've already answered your own question.
Yeah.
And she says, well, let me take it back to my board. I said, okay, as long as you know that if the board may want to throw money at it. The board may say, oh my God, we love them, because the boards never know what the hell's going on in the institution. I said, that's great, but I'm still not doing it. Okay. I'm telling you how much I think it would cost, but you already told me she's not that great of an employee. Everyone likes her because she's a nice person. If this was an easy fit, but it's not, you can't afford it. It's a bad environment to do it, so I'm not doing it.
I see. And focusing a little bit more on immigration cases, what are some really stupid reasons that you've seen a client get rejected for a visa? Do you have any horror stories for us?
Oh God, I've got so many horror stories. Most of the I will say, again, this is not. It's very rare for us not to get someone approved.
It's rare for you guys.
Very rare.
Okay.
Most of the cases that I see the really bad rejections, denials, come from people who have come to us after that has happened.
I see. Who already denied, and they changed
or they rejected it, or they didn't quite. I mean, because again, it's there's a lot of. I like to think there's a lot of artistry and creativity in figuring out how to explain something to a stupid person.
Yeah,
it's not
immigration officers.
It is a real art form, I think, if I say so myself, to understand how to dumb something down so that a complete idiot can get it.
Absolutely, yeah.
That requires really thinking outside the box. And sometimes a lot of people just don't get that. They don't understand. I have seen people get the rejection I just recently saw. Okay, I'll give you an example. This was a group that had been approved many times.
Yeah.
This particular time, their manager decided to file the petition.
Yeah.
And they got what's called an RFE, which is not a denial, but they send it back and say, you haven't provided...
A request for further evidence.
Yeah, that's right. That's when they put it on hold and say things like, what does a conductor do? Where's Carnegie Hall located? Things like that.
They ask you that?
I've had all those questions.
Where's Carnegie Hall located? Really?
Yep. I had not to get off this anecdote, but I had another one last year where we had they're infamous for picking on orchestras that don't hire staff, not the musicians, but staff here in the U.S. So this was, for example, they'll say, well, why can't you hire a librarian in the U.S.? They don't understand. They think a librarian is somebody who works at the library, books. Why can't you hire the general manager of the orchestra? Why can't you hire a tour manager here in the U.S.? Okay, they don't understand all that stuff. Well, this particular one, there was an orchestra coming into Carnegie.
Yep.
And because the orchestra was performing at Carnegie, they wanted proof that the stage managers and tech crew would be performing at the same location. Because they said, how do we know that they're not going to be working somewhere else? It's like, well, the concert's happening at Carnegie. Where else would they work? But they didn't quite get that. And it doesn't show. So I wound up, and I always do, I've got 5 petitions now going with Carnegie, and each one has 15 pages on the history of Carnegie Hall. But this particular RFE response, I was so irritated. I love poking them with a stick. I responded because they where is Carnegie Hall located in reception to where they're staying, and what's the address? They wanted the address, and they couldn't figure out, because one address is on 7th Avenue because that's the admin office, and the other one is Stern. Slightly different address. Oh my God. So I got irritated enough to print out Google directions from the California Service Center, driving across the US with the maps to get them from the California Service Center to the stage door at Carnegie so they could clearly have an understanding of where this was located. Okay, finally it got approved. But the group I was telling you about. So you got to follow along with this level of stupidity. They wrote back and said, you've provided copies of articles and reviews, but you haven't provided evidence that they have received recognition from critics in their field. Okay. Now, I've seen that before, and I know what they want. What they want is they don't understand that if the New York Times writes about a musician or a concert, the review is done by a music critic. They just think it's done by a reporter. Right. So the last time, whenever I have this happen, you literally just give them the bios of the people who wrote the articles and say, these are music critics, or this was written on a blog by the principal cellist of. And they're like, oh, okay. Well, in this case, the manager thought that they didn't understand that because they were thinking way too far. And so they came up with all these reference letters from old octogenarian professors and somebody who knew them from school, all saying how great they were. And the whole thing got denied. Because they didn't get what they wanted. And I'm like, no, all they wanted was someone explaining to them that the guy who wrote the article from Gramophone magazine, or they wanted to understand that Gramophone magazine is written by experts in classical music. So they just literally needed the definition of expert. So anyway, the sad part is same manager tried it all over again and had the same thing happen. But okay. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just really have to understand that they don't know what a concertmaster is. I'll see rejections because they'll say, well, what did they possibly, I don't understand. And I'm looking at this and I said, you talked about your teachers and your repertoire. They don't know who these people are. They don't care who your master class was or your coach was.
I have no idea.
They don't know and they don't want to know. Mm-hmm. They want to know, did you set foot at, Alice Tully Hall? And if so, where is it? I have seen questions like, my favorite one years ago, I got an opera singer who had performed at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden. Yeah. But the word Covent Garden threw them off. And they wrote back and wanted to know whether this was a venue, was it an outdoor venue, was it because they saw a garden and thought it was like a grocery. I don't know what it was. So it's like, no, you have to tell them. You
can't assume anything with these.
Yeah, I mean, if I have somebody who's been at the Opera Bastille, I'm sorry, the Garnier, Opera Garnier in Paris. I always make sure to put in background and go, and it's the one that was in Phantom of the Opera, because they'll get that.
And they're like, oh, I get that one.
Yeah, that's what they want.
Gotcha.
So you really have to say, you don't want to overthink it. So I've got a lot of horror stories about them not understand. I mean, the depth to which they do not understand is astonishing.
All right, let's make a little pause.
Sure.
And I'll just check that everything's going well. And
Okay.
we'll be right back. Okay?
Yeah, it's we do a lot of work with the Orchestra de Teatro Real in Spain, and we have a lot of Spanish groups. And one of the beautiful things and one of the frustrating things about Spanish names is there's like 6 of them.
Oh.
So you have like every member, you got to like, there's an orchestra of like 89 people, and it's like Horatio, there's like their first name, their mother's name, the maiden name, the father's name, and then that's not always the name they'll go by.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like all these beautiful family names, but then you've got to figure out, which of them do they actually use to put on these forms and things.
Exactly. Pablo Picasso has like 23 names, and Picasso's like the last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just never know. The bad thing about Hispanic names is that some of them are really beautiful. Like, for example, my own name, Horacio, is really nice. But if I just say Horacio, Americans will always say like Horacio.
Oh, right.
Which sounds terrible, the
English equivalent is Horatio.
Horatio sounds great.
The English, that's the British equivalent of Horatio. My accent's horrible, but that's Horatio would be, I guess, their British equivalent.
Yeah, and it's a Shakespearean name. It's Hamlet's best friend, right?
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
But not all names have like that nice counterpart.
True,
right?
Yeah.
But so coming back to the podcast, I'd like to ask you, what does think like a lawyer mean to you?
Analytically. It means thinking analytically. Which I sounds more simplistic than it really is, but you'd be surprised how many people don't.
Absolutely. And what do you think are some of the main mistakes artists who are trying to, get a visa and stuff like that make when they're applying? Like, what are the main weaknesses?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. There's 2 things. I mean, first of all, like everyone, not just artists, but everyone applying for them. And this goes back to a theater thing. We learn in theater, know your audience. Mm-hmm. Know if it's a matinee crowd. Know if, like when you compose, and you have different genres of music. Yeah. You have different, who's going to be listening potentially to different works that you're doing. It's the same thing. Yeah. Am I going to dial it up or down or not? Okay, so you've got to know that audience. Okay. And I think one of the mistakes they make, and they're honest mistakes, because the way we do it in the U.S. has long before the current catastrophe.
We'll get on that.
Has always been insane. So the reasonable presumption is that you talk about your talent, you talk about your training, you talk about what makes you distinctive, because that's what an artist visa is all about. What makes you unique? Yeah. Well, I can play. I had a client who could do all of the. I think it was the Paganini Caprices or something, all at one concert, which was insane. Yeah. But okay, they don't want to know that. They don't want to know that. So a lot of times I will look at a rejected petition and I will see everything they talked about was wrong. Their degree, they don't care. Or I'll see, people will come to me and they'll say, well, I've talked to friends, which is always dangerous. And I've been told,
always dangerous.
I've been told that I need to get about 8 or 9 reference letters. And I'm like, no, do not do that.
That's what I heard, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And this is also what happened in this other case where they just got read. They don't want you to go and get all of your professors to talk about your color and your technique. And what they want is, hi, my name is Yannick Seguin. Mm-hmm. And I'm very famous because I have got Grammy Awards and I conduct the Metropolitan Opera and I have the Philadelphia Orchestra and I'm a really famous person. And I know Horatio because he is very distinctive. And he is why he's distinctive. He has worked at this venue, which is really important. And he has worked at if he could say you're also good, but that doesn't matter.
As you said, it says in your document that you sent me while I was applying. They don't care if you're good. You could be the worst in the world.
You can get an award that says you are the world's worst trumpet player, but it's attention.
Yeah.
You can have an article that says, while crossing the street to a rehearsal, this composer ran over an old woman. Oh, well, they thought enough to mention you. They're looking for reality TV. They're not looking for quality. They're looking for America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
If you've ever watched that abominable show, you'll see that we don't actually have that much talent. But
they want attention.
The problem is young students. I can also just talk about what's wrong with the conservatory system in general. Mm-hmm. But among the many things is, they still focus on the idea that if you become technically brilliant, you will have a career. Mm. So the kids are focused, I shouldn't say kids, but they're focused on, on their training as it should be, but not enough on their own promotion, on their own ability to get jobs. It only becomes worse when you have the international students because they're paying top dollar.
Yeah.
And
so much money.
They are not... and the schools don't want to tell them the reality, which is, by the way, once you're done, you won't be able to stay. What? Well, you got a doctorate and you only ever perform with the Juilliard Orchestra. Or they don't tell them about, listen, from day one, you need to train and you need to become the best you can be, but you also need to be doing stupid stuff that looks good on paper.
Yeah.
So the moment you get your work authorization, go sign up to be a cover musician for the pit orchestra of Wicked, or go be a cover musician for the late night shows. They're always bringing in violinists and cellists, so they just sit around and make the pop stars look good. Go do one of those. Yeah. That will look so much better.
Yeah.
On a petition than saying you went to the Yellow Barn Chamber Festival. Nothing against Yellow Barn, it's great, but it doesn't look as flashy as Wicked.
Yeah, everyone.
And this is the thing that always breaks my heart, because it is, God knows, it's hard enough to be a performing artist normally.
Yeah.
In any genre of the arts. It is twice as unfair for foreign students because A, you're paying top dollar. B, you now have to not only focus on getting a job, but focus on getting that coveted ability to work beyond school.
Yeah.
And unless you start that on day one, it's a real challenge.
Absolutely. And what are some advice you would give, as a lawyer, for things that will really make your petition stand out? Like something that will make...
I hate that word, as a lawyer. It's that little scarlet letter on my forehead. But I'm sorry, go ahead. As a lawyer, that would make you stand out?
No. What's some things that, as an artist, you can put on your petition or that you can emphasize that will, significantly increase your chances of getting
I have a thing that I do with an artist I'm meeting with for the first time. I mean, first I'll look at their bio, and I will cross out anything involving degrees and school and repertoire. You said
degrees. They don't care about degrees.
Yeah, so I take all that out.
They don't care if it's Juilliard or Curtis.
So then I start with, okay, is it if they have enough that all you need to do is explain. They won the Queen Elizabeth competition. Okay, great. They don't know what that is, but that's a great thing. If it's something that is great and looks good, you're in golden land.
Okay.
The problem is a lot of artists are doing things that are great to those of us in the industry. Again, it goes back to, I know enough. I know these coaches. I know these people. So I know enough to say, oh, you know what? This is really, it's hard to get into this training program, or okay. But that's going to be a hard sell to them. So then the question I'm looking at, I always do this exercise, which is I'll say, okay, we're going to do some role play. I'll say, artist, I want you to pretend that I am a 13-year-old kid with anger issues and a short attention span. I have just run into you. You've told me you're an artist. Impress me. I remember being in the gym one night.
Yeah.
This was years ago before I fell off that cart, but I remember being in the gym one night, and the gym I used to go to was on 62nd 2nd or whatever. So it was right around the corner from Juilliard. A lot of Juilliard kids went there.
Okay.
And there was a couple kids from Juilliard, and there was this lunkhead who was in software or something. There's nothing wrong with that, but I have a hard time relating to non-creative people. And I remember he was talking to these kids. He's like, I heard you went to like Juilliard. Is that like a school? And they're like, yeah, it's like a college. I mean, you get like a degree. And they were like, well, and I'm thinking, you idiot. It is like, one of the top in the world. And he's never heard of it. And they're like, oh, because I heard you guys talking about performing. And I just, is that like, I mean, is that like Penn State? Is that like, and I'm like, oh God. But at the same time, I'm thinking, yeah, that's pretty much your USCIS examiner. So, it's like what he's literally saying is, I've heard you kids talking about performing. Are you anybody special? Are you anybody famous? And their response was, well, we go to Juilliard, but he's never heard of it. So when I say I'm a 13-year-old with a short attention span and anger issues, you need to tell me what makes you a unique artist in as few words as possible. Also understanding that my job is to keep the U.S. from being infiltrated by you evil artists. And I find it's really hard because a lot of it is cultural. Because a lot of people around the world are not, thank God, are not like Americans where we go around screaming how wonderful we are. A lot of people are very humble about that.
Yeah.
They come from cultures where you don't really promote yourself like that. Whereas Americans typically are used to walking in a room and going, hello, hey, let me tell you what I've done today at work. I got this and I got that, and oh my God. That's really hard sometimes, especially when you bring in a cultural issue. And they'll say, well, and so sometimes we do it at the office what I call pulling out pearls.
Yeah.
Where I'll say, well, what about this? Oh, well, yeah, that was important. That was a national. Well, why didn't you start with that? Well, I didn't think it was really important, but I guess it's important. So you talk it out of them and you realize they've got more pearls than they think. So my point is, you have to get out of the mindset of the industry.
Yeah.
You've got to get out of the mindset of talking within ourselves. Yeah. And now you're on the street with a kid who knows nothing. And what do you do to tell someone, yeah, I'm an important artist, without defining important the way we would?
It's interesting because that's something that arguably all artists should be doing anyway.
Oh God, yes.
Because we get really used to, I'm playing all the caprices or all the Chopin etudes.
Yes.
Wow, that's so cool. But then you have to explain to anyone, like, that's how you should talk to your grandmother about what you do if they're not artists.
Well, it's also, I mean, I'm on a couple different adjunct faculties in this one particular thing. We have this semester where we teach in entrepreneurialism for artists. Exactly. And it's all kinds of entrepreneurialism for artists. But one of the biggest things is learning to self-promote. Learning to say, listing your repertoire will be of interest to people who know that repertoire.
Yeah.
But not bring in new audiences who don't know what that is. So you can't keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. And of course, particularly in classical music, there's this, everybody has focused on, well, we need to educate the audiences more as to what we do. Yeah. And I'm like, well, but that's kind of like getting someone to eat broccoli by telling them how good it is for you. As opposed
that's not their language.
Yeah.
That's not what they're interested in.
And they've already been told broccoli tastes horrible. So you're just trying to convince them of all of its vitamin and health benefits when they already don't like it. They may have never even tried it. Absolutely. They just have been told. As opposed to putting some cheese in it, mixing it with bacon, changing the broccoli.
Broccoli and bacon.
Yeah, but changing it, it's like Brussels sprouts are horrible, but if you roast the Brussels sprouts with bacon and blue cheese, oh my God, you've changed that palate completely. That's a whole different skill set, but it's not unlike what this visa requires, which is it shouldn't, and that's not fair. But it does require, like you said, it's a great point, something artists should be doing anyway, which is being able to translate what they do into for a civilian.
For a civilian.
Yeah.
And I really like to, it's all really important because, as you said, in college, we tend to forget about all that because we're so immersed in the craft. Right. And we just forget that we need to learn how to explain that to anyone. And we're so immersed in our niches that we're always losing our foothold in that. And that's all very important as to an
Well,
artist.
and again, it also goes back to knowing who your audience is and accepting that. And I don't mean that in a bad or good way.
You got to be realistic.
Right? And also, I remember having someone come to my office and just for sake of it, just by way of example, she played the jazz sackbut. Okay.
Sackbut?
Yeah, it's an old medieval instrument.
Yeah.
There's a lot of medieval instruments that no one plays anymore for good reason. But she didn't play the sackbut, but she played something very similar. I just don't want to call her out because it's very unique. But she did the jazz version of this. And she was very upset because her career wasn't going anywhere and her manager wasn't giving her any stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this and I realized that in the world of the jazz sackbut, she's won every award you can win. She's gotten all the audiences of the 5 people who like the jazz sackbut. So I remember saying the issue, and she was blaming everyone else. I said, the issue is how you want to define your career. And there's no right or wrong answer. If your career is to make as much money as you possibly want or can, which I don't agree with as a goal, but that's one thing. If it's to reach as many people as you can, then you may have to step outside of the jazz sackbut world and maybe do some. Well, she didn't want to do that. She wanted to stay with the traditional niche she was in and bring more people into that niche. I said, well, that's hard because they don't even know what that niche is. And, you have to say, this is my audience and I'm going to stick with that audience and be proud of it. And that's totally fine. But you can't make that decision, stick yourself into a bottle and then complain that not enough people are opening that bottle and looking inside. Yeah. You may have to climb. I know I'm beating these analogies to death, but sometimes you have to climb out. And I think a lot of, one of the things to go back to theater is one of the things that I think is different from theater as opposed to classical music is in theater, it's very much drilled in to, there's a relationship between the performer and the audience.
Yeah.
And whether it's comedy, drama, whatever, there's a communication back and forth. I think the best artists out there are the ones who know and yearn for that connection. And there's others who are so in their niche, they're like, I don't really care about connecting with those people. I only want these people. That's okay, but that requires a certain amount of self-realization and self-acknowledgement that you have now cut off certain people. And I think there is a very niche trend in classical music to stay within your lane, and artists who tend to, I think it's changing a great deal. But the old traditional crowd does not like classical artists to change their lane.
Absolutely. And, I'm kind of wondering if going through this process actually benefits the artists. What do you think? Do you think it makes them, it humbles them? Do you think it brings them down to earth a little bit?
Perhaps, but for all the wrong reasons. I mean, I think the issue is something that should be embraced, taught, encouraged, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But not in the context. That's kind of like saying, well, you got hit by a bus, but while you're in the hospital, you learned how to speak Italian. Okay. Well, learning how to speak Italian was great, but you shouldn't have had to have gotten hit by a bus to do it. I think it's the same thing, which is, yes, these are important things, but you should not have to deal with the U.S. government or some moron forcing the issue. And it's really hard to learn anything when you're running around doing this because of an exercise of being able to carry on with your life. I mean, you're not learning anything from it. You're responding to it. And that's the wrong kind of learning environment. That's the wrong kind of, to get anything out of it.
Kind of
is
forced
pointless.
to do it as opposed to wanting to do it.
You're getting it over with and you're not taking anything from it because the whole thing is such an absurd scenario of being hit by this bus with a drunken bus driver.
Interesting.
Where I think, it would be great, but not because of this.
I see. And switching lanes a little bit, I've heard some of my friends try to do this whole O-1 green card application by themselves. What are your thoughts about artists trying to go through all of this thing by themselves?
Well, first of all, there is a website that there's a thing called the Performing Arts Visa Task Force. And it is comprised of the League of American Orchestras, Opera America, Chamber Music America, Theater Communications Group, all the major arts organizations you could think of, including the unions. Everyone gets together.
Okay.
We are part of that. And the League of American Orchestras, which is sort of the head of it, hosts this website that we all contribute to called artistsfromabroad.org.
Okay.
And the whole idea is that an artist or nobody, an orchestra, a venue, you should have to pay someone to fill out what is essentially an application with the U.S. government. That's insane. That's like having to hire an attorney just to fill out a driver's license form. Okay. But it's complicated. It's stupid. Okay. So this website is there for people who want to do it themselves, and they will walk themselves through it, and it's got forms and templates and suggestions. Okay. 2 problems with that.
Okay.
One is you've got to have someone with the self-discipline enough to go through this because it's a lot. The website is lengthy. I've had people kind of say, I looked at it, but oh my God, there's just so much to know. Well, there is a lot to know.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's right, but it's kind of like doing your own root canal and then complaining that there's a lot to know. Okay. If you follow this website, you could, but it's going to require a big commitment to time, and you can put things in writing, but it's hard to really drive home this thing you're talking about, which is think outside the box.
Yeah.
Because then well, what should I say this? There's a lot of, it helps to have a back and forth with somebody. Could they do it? I guess my answer to your question is, could an artist do it on their own? Absolutely. Should they? Really depends on the artist.
Yeah. If it's someone who is really used to, that has that personality of really digging into stuff and really reading it, maybe that person could give it a shot.
And this goes back into a bigger issue, because I always see things as bigger issues, which is a lot of our industry, artists, venues, managers, agents, pick any portion of the industry you want, is comprised of people who want quick solutions and don't want to have to deal with the boring shit. Mm-hmm. I mean, when we take on a visa project, we send out a bunch of things, including this document called Please Read Me.
Yeah, I love
that. And
that.
Please Read Me, it's long. It's like, 17 pages or 18 pages, because there's a lot to know and understand. And we make people sign it to prove they've read it, and they never do. I get questions all the time. We just had it today again and what's on these things. Okay, I'm just curious. When do I have? What's my deadline? Okay, you see that thing in bold that says deadline? That's what that deadline is.
And it's highlighted.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I think we got you all the documents. So now, what happens next? Okay, literally, there is a section called "What happens next?"
Yeah.
Oh, was I supposed to? I didn't think all of this applied to me. I've had things all this. I didn't realize it all applied to me. I didn't realize I had to read all. Well, I mention this because there's nothing an artist can't do. Artists are smart, creative. They can do anything. You can write you can write a symphony. You can write a contract, but you got to want to. You got to put in the effort, the time. It's boring. It's interesting. It's not interesting, and most of the people in the business, whether they are artistic directors, managers, agents, none of them, they all want to deal with the fun stuff. They all want to deal with the let's put on a show and talk about repertoire. And nobody wants to pull out the clipboard because that's boring.
Absolutely.
And let's avoid that as much as possible. Well, that goes back to your question, which is, can anybody? Sure. But it's got to be a clipboard thing. And there's just too many people in our industry on every topic. From commissions, I've got a commission contract now. A manager approached me at a commission agreement. Well, the guy wants the contract, but they haven't agreed on any terms yet.
They haven't agreed.
No, nothing. Well, what's the commission fee? Oh, we'll figure that out. Well, what's it? Well, it's like, they don't want to do any. They just want to do it. They just don't want to. And it's like, okay, that's really what it comes down to, is that it's a very left brain, right brain thing. Can you be creative and at the same time put on a discipline hat and be your own boss, manage your own self?
Absolutely.
Because as an artist, you are never, my wife has the thing, because she's a manager, she always says, nobody can want it more than you do, which means you can hire as many managers, artistic directors, whatever you want, but you're the CEO of you. So you need to be the one to do the work and make sure your eye is on the ball. And there's a lot of artists who just, God love them, they just don't want to have that ball.
Yeah. We had a meeting right before we sent out, or I was approved for the O-1 visa, and you said something really interesting. And we can just kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about current events. You asked me, do you even want to be in the US as an artist?
Oh yeah, we're doing that's the new 2025 thing.
Okay.
Yes, that's a new for 2025. Is why the hell you want to be here in the first place.
So let's kind of talk about that from an immigration standpoint.
Yeah.
And this is like a really hot topic.
Yep.
Let's just start with things that pertain to artists. Are artists getting rejected more than ever?
No.
Or okay.
I have to say, I mean, first of all, we're living in this cloud of unknowing because the U.S. government doesn't give, like, they don't say, here's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Or they're just like, we're targeting everyone, be prepared. And they just kind of pop up. You don't know. They don't say. So, going back to beginning in January, we only know anecdotally and that's kind of always been the case. Like with USCIS, people will say, just going back to the normal thing, it's like, okay, if you want an O-1, I'm being technical here, but if you want an O-1, an O-1 visa can be valid for anywhere from 1 day up to 3 years. Okay, well, the people will say, well, how do I get to 3 years? Well, it's based on the number and frequency of engagements. Okay. What do they want? I don't know. The rule says the classification is based on the number and frequency. They get to decide that all by themselves, and they won't tell you. So you learn over the years, experience seems to say that if it's more than 60 days, they think that's too big. That's not written anywhere. Or people will say, well, how many support letters do you need? Enough. Well, what do they want? I don't know. It seems to be they want around 3, and they don't like it if you have too many because it looks desperate. Well, it's the same thing here with the new immigration hell, which is we've been told now that anybody can be refused, denied for anything that is not in the national interest. Well, how is that defined? We're not telling. Okay, so we just have to guess. Now, so that's got everybody scared. Everywhere. The fortunate, now between January and where we are now in June, everyone is still scared, but at least in the arts world, which is all we work with, we're not seeing as many denials or problems as we thought. Yeah. So that's good. For a while we were like, oh my God, what do we do with it? I mean, so as we've now, we've seen some incidents. We've seen things like, there were a couple of Canadians were turned away at the border because they didn't have their original approval notice, which is a new thing that we never knew they were looking for that.
Like the actual,
correct.
I-797.
Yeah.
That they
So they never wanted that because it's all in the system. So they had this one guy who showed up and he was told, well, I got approved. He goes, yeah, I can see in the system you've been approved, but we need to see the original piece of paper.
It's horrible.
Okay, you're looking at it. You know it. Okay, fine. Well, the worst that happened is he had to go home, miss a flight, get another flight, and show up with the piece of paper, and they let him in. There was another person from Canada who came in, and the guy told her, look, you can either go home and get the piece of paper, or you can pay $1,000 penalty fee, and we'll let you in with a waiver. So she opted for the $1,000 penalty fee.
Oh,
so
there's an option.
Yeah, well, we didn't know that was an option. That's new. Okay,
that's new.
You don't know these things until they happen. That's why, like with you and everybody else, we're like, right now, it's like, we tell us what happened. Even if it was a delightful experience, we need to know. If they're asking questions, we need to know. So we can get a sense.
Yeah.
So the sense seems to be that we just got, and I was so relieved, we got 2 major groups came in without any problem. Yeah. Including a ballet company of about 80 people, and they had like 4 Cubans.
80 people traveled?
Well, these orchestras, like I've got groups right now. We've got orchestras we've got one group coming in for the next season, the 25-26 season. These are all major European orchestras. One has 113 people. Another one has 131. I've got a chamber group with 57. There's a lot of people. Yeah. So we had one just come in, and they had 4 Cubans. And we're all like, oh my God, what's going on? Well, they all came without a problem. I'm like, wow. Okay.
We're not expecting that.
I was not expecting that. Okay. We had another big orchestra come in, and they're like, and this was from Spain. Yeah. And we're like, and some of them, they're all Spanish, but a couple of them had been born in the Middle East. They had, I'm like, exactly.
Yeah,
no problem. They all said, hey, come on in. So, but where we're seeing things is students and Chinese students and, like younger people seem to be in their radar screen. This is our takeaway right now.
Yeah.
Everyone, and we have a lot of people, we've seen a lot of cancellations with people who just are tired of the US and are like, I'm not performing there anymore. Or I've had I think I may have mentioned to you, there was a principal trumpet, one of our clients. And you know how difficult it is to get an orchestral position like that. And
principal,
it was, and I think he was also a Juilliard grad. But anyway, he just walked away from it. He said, this is bullshit. I'm not living here anymore. And walked away and moved home. And, we're seeing that. We're seeing artists who are canceling because they just don't want to be here because it sucks. On the other hand, people I thought would get flagged or not. People are coming in without a problem. Excellent. It seems to be, as of right now, mostly students, young people, and a big thing now is they're looking for repertoire that is not in the national interest. And again, we do not know what that is.
They don't tell anyone. They just
correct.
Man.
Yeah, that's the thing. Which is why we only have stories like the German tourist who wasn't allowed in because he was married to a U.S. citizen, so they determined it was fraud. Okay, that wasn't an arts case, but it was scary. There was a playwright whose wife she was a playwright from South America who married to a U.S. citizen, just coming in. She doesn't work here, but they pulled her aside for 6 hours to grill her on why she come. Okay, so we're getting stories like that. We're getting tales of, people who are in the green card process, leaving the U.S. and then not being allowed back in. None of those have been artists. But there are coming from the civilian world, which means that risk is out there. So, kind of my job is to do the panic that nobody else wants to and kind of say, okay, let's see what is risky and what's not.
And you think of the worst case scenario.
You think of the worst case scenario and try to figure out a way around it or to prepare for it. I've got one of our clients here in New York. They've asked us to come up with sort of a fact sheet they can give to every group and every artist that's coming into this venue on what to say, what not to say, what to do if you get arrested, they're just trying to be prepared.
Yeah.
So that's, this is all craziness.
One main thing that I always hear is that whenever you are applying for a non-immigrant visa, just never say you come here to work.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
To live.
To live, yeah. You never ever say that you're here to stay in the U.S., and if you're a dependent and you're not allowed to work, never ever say that you work.
It's interesting. That's always been forbidden for students and every other kind of visa. There are exceptions. An O-1 is allowed to live full-time in the U.S.
Absolutely.
We just don't know if that's still being interpreted that way. So it's a big question mark. Because again, the sad part is, it's like until we have a few people get arrested, we know what they're getting arrested for. That's the only way to know. So we kind of wait around for a shoe to drop, and I don't want it to drop because if it doesn't drop, it means, okay, we haven't encountered these issues yet.
I see.
But, we need someone willing to stand at the border and say, hi, when I come in, I'm not leaving, and then see what they do. But I don't want to tell anyone to do that either, just to satisfy my curiosity. So we kind of have to guess around it. So the safe advice is just don't say you're living here. That's just, so we tend to say, here's the safe advice. Don't talk more than what you have to. Don't over-explain. Things like that.
Absolutely. And what are some stupid things that you've had some clients say that got them, denied or stuff like? Do you have any examples?
So when you say deny, there's 3 steps to the process.
All right.
There, as you know, there is filing the petition with USCIS. That gets you approved for the visa, but doesn't get you a visa. It gives you approved. Okay. nothing we have seen is changed. Nothing that is happening right now is affecting that part of the process. Just stupid as it always has been. It's not worse. It's not better. Has not been affected at all.
Okay.
They don't seem to be looking at a thing other than the stupid shit they've always been looking at. So that's good news. Where the denials and rejections, such as they are happening, are in steps 2 and 3. So, as you know, you get approved for the visa, which is like a coupon. Now, you take that to a U.S. consulate, and you redeem that coupon by applying for a stamp, a visa stamp. Okay, that's where they do the background checks, and that's where they're ramping up national interest, or they just announced last week that now all students are going to have to be put on hold, and they're going to have to put all their social media is now going to be checked. So if you remember, or I don't know, about 3 weeks ago, they stopped all student visa applications.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Okay, now they're back up again, but with a whole new rule, which is all students now, and that includes J's, exchange students, all that kind of stuff, have to provide all their social media information and then step aside while the consulate looks at their emails, their Instagram, their Facebooks, everything now.
They can look at your emails?
They want everything.
Really?
And what are they looking for? They won't say. Other than anything that suggests that the person entering the U.S. is not against the national interest, and we don't know how they define that.
What would be your best guess if like they found out that you were in a protest in a big protest?
Yes,
going
they seem to be looking for any kind of protest activity.
Okay.
There was a group from it was not a classical group. It was like a rock band or a pop group from the UK earlier this year that got approved for visas, but were denied at the consulate because they looked in and saw that their lyrics were too anti-Trump. So they would refuse to give them the visas, even though they've been approved for them. So we clearly know.
And what was anti-Trump about it? Like, were they like, screw this politician? They were like really.
I don't know. They didn't say.
Okay.
But there was another group actually from Mexico coming in to perform at some festival in California. I forgot. And they didn't get denied entry, but their entry was put on hold so long that they had to miss the festival because they wanted to research they were accused of having lyrics that were too anti-U.S. or was opposing the new U.S. immigration policies. And so basically what they also do sometimes is just put you on hold so long that you miss the entire engagement.
Absolutely.
So we had that happen this year too. Again, it wasn't a thing because we can't control that part.
Absolutely.
This was a stage director for an opera coming in for a major opera company in the U.S. Got approved, no problem. Went to the consulate. They did all these new background checks and discovered that 20 years ago, when she was a kid, she had a DWI. And so they put it on hold and said, before we will give you the visa, you need to have a doctor certified that you were not a medical alcoholic. Okay, well, A, that's bullshit. And B, by the time she could have gotten an appointment, the opera would have been rehearsed, performed, and the set dismantled. So she missed the whole thing.
The whole thing, yeah.
So we're seeing a lot more of that. And we're certainly seeing that's the new threat. But so that's where the denials or rejections will come either there or when people show up at the border and can be taken into custody when they show up at JFK or show up at the airport because they've either said something or look strange or whatever. That's where you've got stories, thank God, not of artists, but stories of visitors and people being arrested when they try to enter the country, sent to Louisiana for a couple of weeks, and then sent home to some third country. There's been a lot of reports of those cases. Thankfully, not with artists.
Yeah.
The worst that we've had so far is artists have additional questions and have delays, but they've all been let in.
Okay, so far things for artists are not that bad. It's just scary.
It's scary. The way I would phrase it is that we are not seeing anecdotal evidence that is particularly targeting the arts, and we're not seeing any cases we're not seeing any arts-based cases that are similar to the disastrous horror stories that have already been in the press from other people.
All right.
We have not encountered those. So the way I always say it is, I'm encouraged that things may not be as horrible as they are. I mean, that's a bad way of saying it. Things are horrible, but it may not have as devastating an implication on our work as we thought.
Okay, I see. And just playing devil's advocate here a little bit, do you think it's fair for the U.S. to deny visas to people who are speaking out against the U.S.?
Of course it's not fair. That's insane. There's no justification for that of any kind. I mean, think about it this way. I mean, put it in this context. In the UK, entities and major arts organizations apply to His Majesty's government to be pre-approved or recognized ahead of time to be experts in their field and to be able to just give works authorizations to people they engage. So if the Royal Opera wants to engage a famous opera singer from Spain or France or Mexico or whatever, they just let the UK government know, we've hired them, here's a form we're giving you to show we've hired them, and here's their work authorization for them to come in and perform, have a lovely day, welcome to the UK.
And that's it.
That's it.
Okay.
Now, if the Metropolitan Opera wants to do that, they have to file a petition to explain to the moron why the Metropolitan Opera made the right casting choice.
I see.
We've seen lots of instances where Carnegie Hall gets bumped back because they don't think the artist was properly engaged. They question the judgment of, so they're already questioning artistic judgment.
I see.
To now go in and say, we're going to look at your thoughts, your opinions. I mean,
see, yeah.
We're now apocalyptic in that sense. I mean, now we have joined the ranks of the most repressive regimes you can think of that say, what are you saying against the government?
Police.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I had a Chinese musician student in the office the other day, and we were talking about this.
Okay.
And she said, this is sort of like, it's like living in a communist country. And I sort of jokingly said, well, you probably know better than I do. But and she said, yeah, except in a communist country, we kind of know what to say and what not. Here, they're just making it up as they go along. And I said, yeah, you think they would do some research and get it right. Like at least research how this works in North Korea as opposed to just making it up. But I mean, yeah, when you're asking if it's fair, that now we're into, we won't let you in because you have an opinion that offends the dictator. What the hell?
Yeah. It
what?
starts to resemble those types
Not
of
even
regimes.
resemble, it is.
It is,
I mean, the only thing that we don't know is, unlike in those countries where, like just today, there was a report of, Iran has started executing people they think are, not supporting their, fine. And Saudi Arabia killed another journalist last week who wrote something against the royal family. They have threatened that, but we haven't seen the evidence of people being, other than small occasions like this UK band.
Yeah.
We haven't seen sweeping denials of people with opinions they don't like, but we clearly have seen them sweeping up students that attend protests they don't like. So that's never happened before.
Yeah.
And
unprecedented for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing, someone commits a crime, okay, fine. But now they've defined crime as saying something we don't like and then defining it as anti-American. I mean, that's chilling.
That is chilling.
This is like the words of the 1930s where you were you were anti, your culture. Well, how'd they use it? You were
anti-American?
No, like in Germany, you were not assimilating. You were deviant. Deviant was something that the government disagreed with.
Interesting.
I mean, we're in that land now. Just the language alone, if you read these executive orders, is chilling.
Yeah.
Absolutely chilling. Now, what they do with it, we're only in 6 months of this. It seems like we've been in it for so long.
Yeah.
It's just 6 months of this hell. Who knows?
Who knows what's going to happen in the...
Right.
following years.
Yeah, and so far, all we know is that Congress and the Supreme Court are going, yeah, okay, whatever. Yeah, okay, let's see how far he takes it. Okay, yep. So it's like, okay, they're taking all the rails off. This is only getting worse.
It is. Well, we've touched some really interesting topics now, and just starting to wrap up. I'd like to just get a little bit more relaxed because we got a little heated there. But
it's a serious thing. I mean, look, I had an option. I wouldn't live here, but I think if anything, we have now proven George III was right, and this.
What did George III say?
Well, I don't know what he said, but I know he was not pleased with the American Revolution. I know that no one in England thought this would work, and they were right. So, we've had a little 250 years of being an adolescent teenager, and now we need to realize that, yes, our parents were right to begin with, and this was a stupid idea.
Okay, amazing.
I have this shirt that I bought. That it's MABA as opposed to MAGA, which is Make America British Again. Yeah,
that's great. So going into this last part of the interview, I would really like to know if there's any lawyers in popular media that you identify with, because most of them are scumbags. Like most of the examples are really bad. Is there any lawyers in media who you really empathize with that you're like, oh, I'd like to be like this lawyer, or I kind of like this lawyer?
Rumpole of the Bailey.
Oh man, where's he from?
I could tell you, or I could tell your listeners to go look it up. But I will tell you, Rumpole of the Bailey is a series of books, and there was a television from England. He was a barrister who had the wigs and the thing, was very clever and was always right, and only defended the innocent people, and was very funny and very witty. And it was a series of books, and then later on it was made into a TV series in the 70s or something. It's very old school.
How do you know about him?
Because I'm very old school. So, you're talking about someone who studied, 18th century theater. Yeah. And basically, I lose interest in the world after about 1920. Once the Titanic sank, everything got kind of boring.
Just downhill from there.
Everyone stopped wearing tails, and everything got kind of like, it was all, now it's like, people just walk around in their pajamas. So I completely lost interest after Edwardian era, and it was all. I don't want to be one of these people that pretends that every era of human history more or less sucked.
Of course.
Unless you were the right person. So you can't really say, wow, the 18th century would be great. Yeah, depending on who you were.
Absolutely.
The one thing about humanity is, there is no period of time.
We've always been
history
terrible.
Have always been horrible to each other. There is no period of time where everyone hasn't been complete assholes to everyone else.
Yeah.
That being said, 18th century was very pretty.
Okay.
So take away, if you separate out the horrible classism and colonialism and all that kind of stuff, the architecture was lovely, the music was beautiful, the costumes, the wigs, the clothes, the garden. England in the 18th century, if you got rid of all the horrible stuff, would be quite lovely.
Okay, what about if you got rid of all the horrible stuff today?
No, I'd still be bored as hell. Because if you got rid of all the stuff today, you'd still have people walking around in their pajamas, eating with their fingers, and that's just no. To me, I have this phrase I love, which is simplicity kills the soul.
Simplicity kills the soul?
Yeah. Simplicity is the death of the soul. God is in details.
Okay.
So, and everything, it's also another thing, which is like, if everything needs to have production value.
I see.
I look for production value. And that was why I like the 18th century Victorian, Edwardian, because you did stuff that didn't make sense, but it had production value.
I see. And what do you think about brevity as the soul of wit?
Oh, no, well.
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, not really.
Really?
I'd say
not really.
Clever. It's not about the brevity. Cleverness is the soul of wit, but not the brevity of it. I think people look to whittle things down into, you need to have enough. And enough might be a huge amount, enough might be just a taste. But it's not about the brevity, it's about the quality. I would say cleverness, being witty is being clever. It's not necessarily being, having a one-word response.
I see.
Churchill was very witty, but sometimes it would take him a sentence or two to get the point out. It's more about cleverness. The goal should never be just to be brief.
I see. And any final word of advice for artists who are trying to be clever about their immigration processes,
Well, I don't think it's about being clever. I think it's about being realistic.
Okay.
To go back to what I've said is you need to know to go back to the artist visa issue. If you are sort of the younger, newer artists, it's very different if you are, the Berlin Phil or you're, a major Grammy winning art. I mean, it's stupid, but it's easier. That's just printing out Wikipedia pages. For younger graduates or newer artists who haven't also won big prizes and things, it always comes down to understanding what you're up against and creating, composing, performing for that audience. So whatever you do, whether you're a composer, a creator, performer, a writer, doesn't matter, your audience is that dumb kid who wants to keep you out and protect the US from you. So you need to know that audience, and everything you do in preparing your petition and focusing on this needs to have with that dumb kid in mind.
Absolutely.
You're not trying to impress your coaches, your teachers. You're not applying for a grant. You're not trying to get into a training program. It's none of those people.
It's a different audience.
Right.
It's different.
So you're creative. Artists are creative. They must be. So you take that same level of creativity, but channel it to the person who is in that chair reading your petition with anger.
You just gotta picture them.
Yeah.
What would that person be like if you could
13-year-old boy with anger issues.
That's it.
Yeah. His parents one time took him to see Ice Capades or Disney on Ice, and he hated it, but his sister liked it. And maybe, I remember years ago, I was at this conference where, this was a long time ago, where they actually had a lot more interrelationship between people who worked in USCIS and us. And so we had this artist conference, and we had a session, and we actually brought a USCIS supervisor into the session.
Really?
And to talk and stuff. Okay. And well, being people in our industry, they all wanted to make, so one of them said, not thinking, but being very sweet, said, what are your favorite kinds of performances? What do you like to do, when you go to the performing arts? And I will never forget this answer to the day I die. Bowling. Man, these and I'm like, well, there you go.
They're a different breed.
I could not have set this up better myself. You are trying to explain what a Juilliard grad does to someone who goes, and there's nothing, I was in a bowling league when I was a kid. I don't want to pretend that anything's wrong with bowling. It's just not the same thing as going to listen to a trio or going to listen to, and nothing wrong with it. I suck at it, but it's very fun. But it gives you, this is that frame of, they're pulling from their own experiences.
That's what they know.
That's what they know. So it's up to you to educate them, not just tell them what you've done, but then take it to the next step, because they have no frame of reference for it.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, I had a really good time talking to you.
Yeah, same
mostly
here.
listening to you.
Sorry, I tend to ramble. Sorry.
No, I love it. I always find that I learn the most when I'm quiet. I listen to someone like you speak. And I really, really had a really wonderful time.
Thank you. It was good questions. Thank you so much. It was fun.
Absolutely. And I can't wait to keep working with you. And I'm sure I'm going to need your services lots of times after today. I have to apply for these again.
You've got a new project coming up yourself, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's...
the Carnegie Hall, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's your Carnegie Hall debut, right?
Yes, with the American Composers Orchestra. They're commissioning me.
My wife is the manager of the conductor and music director of the American Composers Orchestra.
Oh, really?
Whose name escapes me at the moment because it's so hot. So she's going to be there. and I will be there. Curtis
Stewart.
Curtis. Yeah, he will be there. Curtis is amazing. I love Curtis. So this is going to be great. It's Old Home Week, and it's going to be an awesome thing to hear your music performed there by them. That's just
amazing.
Really
it's
great.
It's an amazing organization that they've supported the hell out of so many artists
Yes,
like
they have.
myself.
Yeah, they're
just a great thing. And talking with you, it brings me a lot of hope for humanity. Before talking to you, I kind of thought that most
That's putting
lawyers,
a lot on my shoulders, but okay.
No, I thought a lot of lawyers were really like the kind that you were talking about earlier, that they just want to sue everyone. But it's really great to hear about a lawyer who has principles and they want to help people.
Let me just end by, rather than end on that note, I'd rather say that you and young artists and those who create and speak and reach people, that's the hope for humanity.
Oh.
We don't do shit other than hopefully you don't get in trouble and make sure things happen. But another thing, reality is for people who lack imagination. It's the artists who bring the imagination. It's the artists who, without them, it's just a lousy reality. And that sucks.
That's
it's really, that's all we got. All we got is the creativity that artists bring in every possible genre that they do.
I love that. Reality is for people who can't do any better.
That's right.
Okay.
You just stick with it.
Well, that's wonderful. And where can we find you if one listener wants to hire your services?
We have a website.
Yeah.
GGArtslaw, GGArtslaw.com. There's all kinds of stuff on there. We have a mailing list. We try to send out like a newsletter once a month or so with different things happening in the industry, some jokes, some stories, immigration updates, visa things. People will write in and ask questions. So we have that, and we have a page of legal resources for people who just need templates and stuff like that. And then you can schedule consultations. You can read about our clients. You can click on links to other interviews and things like that.
Yeah,
so all kinds of stuff.
And you represented some really wonderful clients like TwoSet Violin and all sorts of really wonderful artists.
We're very fortunate. I love the people we work with. It's fun. And when there's nothing like, being able to they do the work, they're the artists, they're the magicians, but knowing that, if you can make it easier for that to happen, that's a great thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for your time. I really had a wonderful, wonderful experience talking to you. And, please, everyone, get a hold of Brian, hire them. They're wonderful. And I have my visa on right now here in New York.
And don't call me a lawyer.
And never call him a lawyer.
Right.
And, thank you so much for your time and for helping me out.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah.